Hey, this is Candia Raquel, and you are at the Sensual Sessions podcast, the place to explore sensing pleasure through your senses and expressing yourself in a way that is completely free from inhibition and full of brimming movement. If you haven't subscribed already, please go to my website, centrodepoder.com, and get yourself signed up to get these episodes delivered on your inbox weekly. And today we have a very special guest. This is Dr. Edward Feldman. He studied with Moshe Feldenkrais himself on the second USA training, and he has an amazing background. So I am honored to have Dr. Feldman here. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
So tell us, Edward, how did you become interested in this somatic approach of movement and healing? Like you were always deep in contact with your own self, or it happened due to a happening in your life?
That's a good question. It happened, I think, the answer is it happened due to a happening. I mean, I was a good athlete growing up. I played a lot of sports and I was a natural athlete, but it wasn't until I encountered the Feldenkrais method when I was 30 that I realized that I wasn't in touch with myself sensorily. Actually, I had a car accident about 8 years earlier when I graduated college that made me that I had to recover from this accident, but it also made me realize that I was numb to myself, to my own, experience of myself, my emotions, my sensations. So that literally was the turning point in my life. I was about 23, and from that point on, I made it like my mission to know myself from within myself, from like an embodied place, right? Because on the outside, I looked okay, but on the inside, I was really numb. So I came to the Feldenkrais method when I was about 30, and I was just amazed, I mean, being in the presence of a genius, of a bona fide genius like Dr. Feldenkrais was amazing. And, through that work, I began to wake up to myself, from an internal place, because I had already started chiropractic school, and I was going to be a chiropractor, but that was a very external decision. It was like, oh, I want a career, I want something to make money. But I realized, it was just like a license to have as an umbrella. But I knew I wanted to do other things like the Feldenkrais method. And so that became like a jumping off point when I graduated chiropractic school to explore other kind of modalities. Of course, first Feldenkrais, but then craniosacral therapy, then biodynamic craniosacral therapy, which is again a very internal, coming from a very, internal place of knowing oneself. So I just want to say, like, one of Moshe's big sayings was, to know oneself really well. It means to really to go deep within, to explore what's one feels and senses internally, right? That's the only way to really know. And so that became the journey that I, entered into.
Yes, know yourself, like the Delphi Oracle said, Tenet Noche. And we in this Western culture think that we get to know ourselves by thinking our way into knowledge in this like um Cartesian cogitum of I think, therefore I exist. But you said something very interesting, that we get to know ourselves by sensing ourselves. And I find paradoxical that you said that you were an accomplished athlete, but you were numb to yourself. And you came to the realization through that accident. So that's like another, I believe, cultural blind spot that we have, that we have the idea of being super fit, super toned as the equivalent of being like in the perfect like Greek harmony of mind and body together. But that's not necessarily the case. Like having the appearance of a healthy body and even a proficient body doesn't necessarily mean that you know yourself. So do you recall when was the moment that in along your lifeline from you being a baby to you being 23 years old, where you became numb? Like,
No, I think no, because this is really a key point actually that I wanted to bring up about safety. I believe
okay,
safety, you know, in order to really know oneself, in order to really be oneself, like you seem pretty comfortable with yourself. In order to be really comfortable, if you look at people and some people like look stiff or they look like they're playing a role or they're always acting, you know, and then if you look at someone else who's totally comfortable and you feel, how do you know that? Because you feel comfortable, you feel their presence, you know, you could call it mirror neurons, whatever, but you know, just like if you were in the presence of a dog that you loved or a baby, you know, you automatically become, you know, vulnerable. That's because they give you that sense of probably safety that you feel right in their presence. And I didn't know it, but growing up, I didn't feel safe, right? So in my earliest experiences of life, unfortunately, I didn't have that experience, right? That some people may take for granted. So I had to earn it actually. And through these different, you know, therapies and somatic therapies, Feldenkrais and biodynamic cranial, and then later on polyvagal theory, which is Dr. Porges's work, where he talked about, you know, like seeing the world through this lens of, you know, safety or threat. You know, how do we, you know, see the world? And so it's a big, oh yeah, so you know, like Irene Lyon, she's a person, you know, practices. She's combined Feldenkrais with SE, Somatic Experiencing. She used to work closely with Peter Levine. So she kind of developed her own model. She's on YouTube a lot. And what she discovered, and I totally agree with, she said, well, why aren't some people getting better on my table? Because she'd be doing Feldenkrais with this population. And she noticed that a good percentage, 20% or whatever, weren't responding. And then she realized that the reason they weren't responding was they had early trauma that really they were in a state of freeze or you know, fight or flight. They really, in order to learn, right, in order to truly learn to sense yourself, to really be able to, you know, everybody says, well, feel yourself. I used to listen to these recordings of Moshe like nonstop for my first 10, 15 years after my training. Man, Feldenkrais would be exhorting you, feel this, you know, you'd be, feel this. But, you know, the truth was I was just parroting I wasn't really feeling myself. Even this is 15 years after the training ended. Why? Because I still had this early trauma, these imprints that I hadn't really digested. You know, trauma is really an overwhelming experience that you haven't fully digested. It doesn't have to be something like, you know, horrific like rape. You know, it could be any experience that you can't assimilate and digest, right? And so, if, you know, it could be verbal abuse, it could be whatever. So, whatever is in your body that you haven't fully digested is kind of condensed, you know, as like they call it, like in craniosacral energy cysts. These are places that just basically haven't integrated into your body physiologically. So I had to really discover those and you know, really get beneath that. And when I did, all of a sudden I listened to Moshe's lessons and I would get the lesson in 5 minutes. The whole thread of the lesson I would get. Because why? Because I was totally in my sensory body. Whereas if you are in this other place that I mentioned, you're not in your sensory body. You may think you are. You may act like, oh yeah, I'm a Feldenkrais practitioner. I'm a Alexander. No, it doesn't matter what type, you know. Do you see what I mean? It's really making,
yes,
you know,
yes. Safety. Safety is key for the developmental process of self-knowledge. And in a way, numbness is a suit of armor. And this gives us also the perspective of being very gentle and respectful to ourselves, to our numbness, and even to our walling off, or like our own disassociation, because that served a fundamental role of protection. And of course, like when we are little, we 100% depend on our tribe. Like whomever is feeding you needs to keep on feeding you, otherwise you die. Like even though we are super modern and Western and whatever, that's the reality. And we as little children, or even teenagers, we got a better mold somehow to that environment, to
Right.
fit in and to comply by means of plain survival. And
It's
well,
rough.
the price is super high, is this numbness, and it's this decades long delay on the developmental of the self. But it is beautiful to have the invitation of life along our life story to open up and then like take ownership and maybe begin the journey of maturity by realizing, like, okay, I am not a little child anymore, and I know the rules very well. I know the game, and I know how to behave in a board meeting or in a hospital or at the police department. Like I'm not gonna go ape crazy, but I can create my own safety container to look in and wonder what's in me, what am I really about, and realize that there's a treasure within, that is the self, that is the aliveness, and like you say, the alive center. And you say that, yeah.
Just interject. Let me just say something. You know, one of my best teachers, Dr. Franklin Sills, he taught he introduced the biodynamic model of craniosacral therapy here in America. You know, it was formerly, you know, under just the osteopaths. And this was a different model from the biomechanical craniosacral to this biodynamic model. Anyway, one of the tenets of biodynamic is relationship. And my teacher, you know, in other words, how we bring ourselves to the table, right? It's not what we do. You know, you could do anything, but if it depends on how you bring yourself to meet the client, right? And one of my teachers, Franklin, said, you know, it's not the baby. It's not so much that the baby needs love. Yeah, he said the baby needs to be received in its love.
Yes.
Very,
Yes.
you know, say, oh, my mother didn't love me. No, it has nothing to do with it. It's whether or not you were seen, whether you were heard, whether you were acknowledged, whether you were mirrored properly. That's what imprints, you know, on the
Yes.
baby. So you see, that's what sets the stage. Do I feel safe? Do I feel, you know, safe in this world? Do I feel like I belong in this world? Do I feel, you know, part of this world? And really get yourself on that level. When you, no matter what your history is, then you can really attend to yourself in this really deep way. But if you don't have that experience, or if it's kind of a mixed experience, you may not be able to attend to yourself in the way that Dr. Feldenkrais, you know, asked us to attend to ourselves in his lessons, which are beautifully, amazingly constructed lessons. I mean, the most amazing, you know, lessons of in terms of the logic of the nervous system. But you have to be present with yourself enough to let the lesson work through you,
Yes.
right? So does
Yes.
that make
Be
sense?
present enough with
Yeah,
yourself to let
thanks.
the lesson work through you. And like you say, we need to be seen, we need to be mirrored, because otherwise, in a certain way, like if we are not seen, then we deny the glance of our true self. Like we are the ones that don't see ourselves. Like we don't, if we were not mirrored, we don't want to look at the mirror of our own sensations. So I believe that this development of awareness through movement, this becoming sensitive to ourselves, to and open like the gates of Pandora's box to see within whatever is there. And then trauma will come out, the walling off will come out. Like we will begin to realize that we don't realize much. We will begin to sense that we don't sense much, that we are actually numb, that we are even strangers to ourselves. Like we may know very well our discursive thought that sustains the solidity that we project in the world as like a certain interface of who we are, and these are my credentials, and this is my accomplishments, and this is my background, and etc. But we gotta look inward. Like if we were not seen, why would we deny our own glance? And I believe that if we don't do that, then like we will be also numb to pleasure.
Absolutely. And just to say what you were just saying, just to piggyback on that, it's like an embodiment, right? You have to come back into your body, all these disowned sensations and feelings that you didn't want to feel, right? All the hurts, all the terrors, all the, anger, all the negative stuff. You have to allow yourself to register that and feel that, and perhaps even definitely sense it, but maybe even express it, right? So I had to go on my own path. I had to go in many directions, because as brilliant as Feldenkrais was, I had my own traumas that I had to kind of expunge out of me. And it wasn't going to happen through just movement, unfortunately. It had to happen in other emotional contexts. It happened through Reichian therapy. It happened through somatic experiencing. It happened through biodynamic craniosacral therapy, where I had this living, breathing experience of myself and what I was feeling. Right? It wasn't just a pure sensation. Maybe it was a deep, grief or sadness that I could let myself feel. So that's you want to be, like Rumi says, welcome to all these sensations and feelings in yourself. Right? Rumi said,
Yes.
no. He said, don't worry, no feeling is final. Like, don't worry, you're not going to get stuck anywhere. No feeling is final. I thought that's the greatest.
Final. Yes, yes. That is being in touch with the livingness. Like, okay, let's allow this sadness to run its course. Let's allow this grieving to run its course. Also, let's not try to hold on to this pleasure, because it will also run its course and more things will come up. But then we are with the circuitry of livingness flowing freely. Whereas if we are stuck with traumas and past experiences and insecurities and inhibitions, then we are like um, keeping certain frozen experiences from the past in our system and making them present, though they are like super outdated. It's like if we were a refrigerator with, I don't know, with a yogurt that was from 20 years ago, and a piece of steak that was, I don't know, there for already 4 decades, and it's already a rock. Like we need to clean our inner house and be more fluid. So I want to ask, yeah.
One of my other paths that I went on was exploring the path work. It's called path work, and it was these sort of psycho-spiritual guided lesson, from a guide from another dimension, you could say. It doesn't matter, he said, the guide said, it doesn't matter the vehicle of transmission. These were like the most beautiful teachings that came through. It came through this woman, Eva Parakos, actually. She was a channel for these teachings. And, one of the lectures he talked about, he said, most people would rather, climb Mt Everest. They would rather climb a mountain. They'd rather go back to school and get a second PhD rather than go inside and really feel what's inside. I mean, really feel it. I mean, like you talked about the negativity, the negative emotions, not just the pleasurable. You can't get to the pleasure, like you said, unless you feel the negative. You can't really get to the depths of pleasure unless you feel all the other stuff, right? You can't. It's like it just it doesn't register deeply. It doesn't really go in deeply.
Yes, and that's exactly where the safety that you mentioned comes in. Like being safe enough, like we cannot not have full insurance and full security and full safety, because like we know how the world is and we know how we are, like also unpredictable, but we can have like confidence and a certain trust in ourselves and trust in life as well, that enables for this tightening, solidity, past traumas stuff to open their mesh a little bit, to create a little bit more breathing room, and also while we digest and process all that stuff, to also become like more willing to welcome pleasure and to relax those endless demands of virtue that are very hard to reach in order to feel deserving of pleasure and delight, and just like welcome the best of life, like the pleasures of life in our flesh, and the things that come forth. Yes.
What you just said a minute ago about trusting yourself, self-trust, I believe comes from, again, this sense of embodiment, that when you truly embody all these, various different, sensations and emotions, then you really have true self-confidence, and you can experience, you can real and then therefore also true self, pleasure, because you're really yourself, you're totally yourself. And when you come from that place, you meet the other person in the present, and they sense it, they feel it, even if they don't even know it. They feel, oh, this person's okay, I feel pretty comfortable around him or her, but that's what true confidence is. It's from that place of knowing, embodiment and knowing yourself.
Yeah.
Course it leads to pleasure. Pleasure is like, what do I want to say? Pleasure is like, it's not the opposite of this. It's like you have all this room, right, to feel yourself, right? You have all this space because because it's like you're fuller, in yourself, not, in every way, and it's so you're not living in this very cramped way. You're just, you're expansive, right? You're open to life. You're receptive to life. That's pleasure. By the
Yeah.
way, pleasure is a continuum. People think, because people see me as a chiropractor and they think pain or no pain. This whole continuum of pleasure, you can go from like pain all the way to, ecstatic pleasure. There's a whole continuum. It's not like on off on. I think a lot of people live in this on off duality. I'm either in pain or I'm like really happy. Like I don't know what makes you happy, but it's, every day, every experience, I can go cook a meal, I can open the refrigerator, if I can do the dishes, if I'm feeling really together, that's pleasurable.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
It's a pleasurable experience. Everything is pleasurable, frankly,
Yes.
if you.
Exactly. Exactly. Everything is pleasurable. Like washing the dishes, and then you find out that the plate is super soft and the water is sliding, and that you're playing with the foam of the soap, and the spongy is squishy, and suddenly like you are 3 years old again, and it's not that you are childish. It's actually that you're tapping into this true essence that actually never gets old, only gets shadowed and numb. And you mentioned on your website that your mission is to wake up people to their alive center, and that sometimes it takes months, years, even decades to heal. But when we tap into self-sensing, like we can even get surprised that healing can be automatical. So I am curious to know, what does this has to do with pleasure, like this ability to heal in a split second, something that you were dragging decades ago. And what does this has to do with sensitivity?
Well, frankly, I don't know if anything really heals in a split second. I mean, it's a nice thought, and I've had moments of that, but I have to say, true healing is deep, and it depends on your history and depends on what happened to you, but it's a process, right? First of all, let's all agree it's a process, right? We're all on this life's path. Some started off better than others, some had a harder time, but we're all on this life path, this process. And I believe, like, as we wake up, right, as we get to know ourselves better and better in every way, like we're saying, emotionally, sensorily, in every way, and we just, it's like we keep having like this bigger bandwidth, like, to live from, right? More music to hear, bigger bandwidth. It's like we can experience more, right? We can, and then we feel alive, and so that again is what pleasure is. It's not like, oh, I'm going to have sex, I'm going to have an orgasm. No, that's just one aspect of pleasure, right? Swimming in the ocean is, absolutely pleasurable. Eating a fantastic meal is pleasurable. Listening to beautiful music, and right. So I mean, but I think it's a process of us, becoming more open to ourselves and to life, right? Because of we've, again, we've digested all these traumas in ourselves, all these places that we didn't want to visit, before, but when we realize there's no real spooky boogeyman there, we just have to be able to tolerate, whatever there is, I mean, I also mentioned in my website, I went to Peru and Costa Rica to do plant medicine. And, believe me, when you do plant medicine, you encounter, like, you have this visceral experience of whatever you're afraid of, whatever. That's what it does, this medicine. It sort of just puts it right in your face, like whatever you're afraid to face. And it's not an easy experience, to say the least. But when you get through it, it's like you see the world and you experience the world in a completely different way, right? The things that you were afraid to do, you do. It's because you had this tremendously, you faced yourself at such a deep level. Do you see? Through this plant medicine, they call it ayahuasca, but it's plant medicine. But it's such a deep knowing, it's such a deep facing of oneself. But it's still the same thing. It's facing. You're really facing yourself. That's the scariest thing on earth, right? To face yourself, right?
That's the scariest thing on earth, to face ourselves. That's why there was a whole oracle building in Delphi Island or coast, and the legend, know thyself. Like, this is a life journey to know thyself, and it's a worthwhile journey, definitely. And it's pleasurable. It's because knowing yourself is a journey that diverge in a totally from trying to be what the world expects you to be, though actually there are no clear guidelines, and it's what we think the others think that they expect from us. So it's a game of projections. It's like being lost in a hall of mirrors, whereas self-knowledge is the inner gaze. It's to welcome the reality in us, and it's the authenticity that comes with vulnerability to see what maybe there are no boogie monsters, but there are also these aspects from me that I don't like, or my limitations and my handicaps. And also, like, there are these great gifts and capacities to share and also to delight in. And I like that you said that healing is a process. It doesn't happen. Maybe we can have healing realizations that are like eureka moments that trigger healing paths. But I like the idea of in a way allowing ourselves to be kind of undone, kind of a work in progress, in order to not procrastinate on pleasure. Like, don't wait until you are 100% healed from absolutely everything in your past in order to delight into the present moment. Because what if life throws at you a curveball, or there is war in the neighbor country or whatever, and like there will always come stuff. So yeah, it's also like letting go of this entitlement to the pursuit of happiness, to the pursuit of delight, and welcoming the gifts of life, and in the same way that we offer our gifts, and not in a transactional way, but like, okay, washing the dishes is pleasurable, going for a walk is pleasurable, being with the beloved on intimacy, it's pleasurable. So there are gradients and colors of pleasure, and there are also currents of discomfort and pain and worries and stuff. But why wouldn't we welcome life as it is? So, would you share with us a little experience exercise to sense ourselves, like to become a little bit less numb and more available for pleasure and know ourselves better?
Okay, I'll try. I wanted to say one thing before that I do that though. You know, even like doing art, for instance, can be the most pleasurable thing in the world. Why is it so pleasurable? Why do I say that? Because when you really see, right, when you switch channels from just looking to seeing, right, you're not staring, you actually start to see, and you make all these distinctions, right? You make all these um, distinctions between like this value versus this value, right? Instead of drawing shapes, you're drawing differences in values. That's how the shapes emerge, right? And that becomes so interesting and so enlivening that you feel pleasure. So what's a big aspect of Feldenkrais and what's a big aspect of art is making distinctions, right? Making sensory distinctions. Okay. So with that in mind, just even as you're sitting, so let's just sit in our seats since we're doing that, and just really feel, your sit bones. Really feel your feet on the floor. Feel your right foot, feel your left foot. Feel how each foot makes contact. Feel if one foot makes better contact than the other, more full contact than the other. And then go to your sit bones, and the same thing. Does one sit bone feel like it's sitting deeper into the chair, into the seat, right? So like you're almost like leaning into that sit bone. And then the other one, maybe not as good, right? You just don't feel it as distinctly as the other, right? And then even as you sit like this, right, just feel like the distance between your right shoulder and your right hip. Feel that distance, and then compare that distance to the distance between the left shoulder and left hip, and just see which one feels bigger, which one feels shorter, right? And it's the same. We could take it again. So coming back into your sit bones, both sit bones, just feel how are you sitting forward on your sit bone in front of it, or are you sitting, behind it, right? So your back's around it, or you're sitting squarely on the sit bone. Just notice how, again, how you're sitting on your sitting bones, right? Like everything is suspended off of that, right? And then as you come up to your shoulders, right, and neck and head, feel the same thing. Like, where is my head? Where is the distance? How much distance is there between, compare the distance between my right ear and my right shoulder and my left ear and left shoulder. So is my head sitting really in the middle, or is it tilted to one side? So just notice that as well. So you don't have to change anything. That's the other part. You're just kind of just observing. You're good enough. You're fine. We're just making these, there's no evaluations, no judgments. We're just observing, right? We're just sensing ourselves. And sense the middle part of your back below, the shoulder blades, or in the middle. Most people have a hard time with that part of the back. That part's usually very invisible, because if you're sitting at a computer working, kind of your head's sucked into the computer, but the middle of your back and upper back is very numb, right? Because you're not engaging that part of you. So as you come back and sit more on your sitting bones, just feel the part of your middle back, right? That you know, and just allow your breath, or allow your attention to really occupy that space between your shoulder blades, between the middle back. So you're coming back into your back, right, so to speak. And again, you're sitting again onto your sit bones. So maybe if you were too far forward, you can come back a little bit more onto your sit bones. If you're a little behind your sit bones, you can come slightly forward. So you're sitting again more on top of the sitting bones. You can again go forward and back, just to find where is that optimal place where I'm really sitting on my sitting bones. So gravity could fall through you, right? You're not having to hold yourself up. You're really sitting on your sitting bones. And just maybe listen into your breath, maybe listen into your chest area, your heart area, and just notice what you sense there. Just bring your attention to your chest and your heart, and just notice what's going on there. Just take a minute, couple of minutes. What's your internal state? Do you feel calm? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel, are you thinking about something, worried about something? Just let yourself rest in your breath and in your chest. You're just kind of coming back to your body, to your heart chakra, to your chest. Just let yourself be breathed. So you're letting your breath come in through your nostrils and out through your nostrils, but you're just sensing yourself in your chest. Not pushing away any thoughts or feelings, just allowing anything and everything to be there. Just being with yourself, being with what is. Resting in yourself. If something comes up, just observe it, let it pass through. feeling or sensation, just observe it and let it move through you. Slowly bring your attention back to your whole self, your whole body, all of you, feet on the floor, and gradually open your eyes if they've been closed and begin to just look around the room. Just let your attention, your head and eyes gradually just begin to look around, taking in what's in your room, letting it come to you. Notice how you feel.
Very happy.
Good.
Yes. I love this experience because we get to realize how pleasurable simply existing is. That is cheap. You can just like sense your seat bones and be there sensing, delighting. And this is very powerful. Like now I feel suddenly even more enthusiastic. Like now I want to wash all the dishes and write a newsletter and do a lot of things because this pleasure, like that we get from tapping into our sensitivity, is simply what emerges from having our channels flowing. So thank you so much, Edward. Great experience.
You. It's great. It was great to be with you. It's really good.
So tell us, how can we learn more from you, get therapy?
So my website is very full of information. It's my last name, feldmanwellness.com. And it has my email on it. It has ways to contact me directly, but it also has blogs. It has, lots of blogs and lots of information. So, that would be a great place to find out about a lot of things, a lot of different topics.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Edward.
Thank you very much.
Sensualist, go to feldmanwellness.com and get all the goodies, read the blog post and learn more from Edward. And also go grab the free guide to awaken sensuality on www.centrodepoder.com. And until next time, remember to take the time to sense your fire so you can share the flame.